All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Eclipse Evolution podcast. I'm your host, Savannah Rose Johnson, and I'm so excited, so excited to welcome my guest today, Gabrielle of Cacao Wisdom. She's a dear friend of mine, and I knew as soon as we started connecting that I needed to have her on our show. So, Gabrielle, thank you so much for taking your time or taking the time out of your day to join us today and to share yourself and your message. It's such a fascinating one that I know everyone's going to enjoy hearing. So, if you wouldn't mind, just by kicking us off with a little introduction of who you are.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for having me. Yes, my name is Gabrielle, and I started a company called Cacao Wisdom, where I import sacred ceremonial cacao from Guatemala and also from Indonesia, from the island of Bali, here to the United States, because I would like to help spread this plant medicine. She's a heart opener, Mama Cacao, and she really helps people connect with their emotions, with their subconscious, and with their bodies, especially in our society where we're very in our thoughts. She's a very powerful tool to help kind of ground you into feeling in your inner knowing, heighten your intuition. And yeah, so that is my mission to help spread Mama Cacao, especially around the areas of like healing, wellness, and expansion.
Mm, I love that. Yes, that's actually how Gabrielle and I met. She was hosting a cacao ceremony at the Santosha studio that I frequent, and I had never, I mean, I'd heard of cacao, but I never heard of cacao ceremonies. Gabrielle, what I would love to have you explain, just to kind of start us off, is explaining the concept of ceremony. Because I feel like we have, at least in our American culture, we have like graduation ceremonies and our own kind of connotation with that word. But how is cacao used in its own ceremony?
Yes. So that is the original intent of cacao. One of its main original intents is to sit with cacao in ceremony. And when we talk about in ceremony, it's a few different things. One is creating space for you to have time to like think and feel and be with the cacao in this circumstance. Another is kind of the respect that comes along with holding ceremony, because it's all about understanding that this is valuable and I'm going to take time, energy, money, and commit it to this, to myself. And another piece of it being ceremonial is understanding the kind of spiritual or the unknown or the unseen parts of the experience too. Some people shy away from the idea of it being ceremonial because maybe they think it might have to do with a religion, but it actually has nothing to do with a religion. It just has to do with believing in a higher power of sorts and knowing that there is this power in creating space to meditate, to connect with your intuition or any other deities or religions that you believe in. It's just creating that space, that like channel for contemplation, for connectivity, and creating it in ritual is that respect, that reverence, that understanding that it's more than just a drink that you drink in the morning. It's more than just like a commodity. It's more than just like a food that you consume. It is something that helps, yeah, create that connection.
Mm. Thank you. That's so interesting. You're so right. Cacao is so much more than just like something that we use as far as like just something that we consume to. I mean, definitely nourish us, but it. I've noticed you personify cacao and use like she pronouns. Can you tell me about that? I think it's really curious.
Yeah. So I have done a couple different trainings around cacao. One of them in Guatemala with a shaman of the Mayan lineage. And he taught me about the legend of Ish Cacao. And Ish Cacao is the Mayan goddess of cacao. And when you drink cacao, there you connect with its spirits. Like there's a lot of indigenous wisdoms that, you know, the trees have spirits, the animals have spirits, plants have spirits. Mama Cacao is a spirit for sure. And when you drink her, you can lean into her energy. And it's kind of like working with goddess energy, where you can lean into this energy and use it as a support mechanism. Like you were using the word like nourishing. Drinking Mama Cacao is very nourishing because she has this energy of holding space, like holding a container, a protection container, which helps you go internal a lot easier, helps you go within a lot easier because you feel very safe to do so. So you might be able to explore maybe traumas or memories or shadows or things about yourself that maybe you've tucked down that you haven't wanted to explore before. You may find you feel much safer, much more secure to explore these things. And that's all around the what you're talking about, the she, the personification of cacao is there is this goddess, there's this kind of energy around it where she has a personality.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I know I don't know. I call her Miss Cacao. That's just like, maybe that's because I'm Southern. I'm not sure. But she definitely makes my dreams very interesting. Like I know after every ceremony that I've been to with you, I like barely sleep that night because my dreams I'm getting so much information. That's so cool. Thank you for explaining that because I've always kind of had that curiosity in my mind. Thank you for explaining the history. What kind of did your trainings look like when you did those? Did they look the same being in different regions, or did they each have I'm sure they each had their own interesting components, but what does like a cacao training look like?
Yeah, they were both very different. One thing I do want to add about the like she pronoun too that I just thought of was I've been reading that book Braiding Sweetgrass, and she talks about how language is really important. We use the term it a lot in the English language, and it creates this like barrier or like separation of us from like Mother Earth, from trees, from rivers, from like everything around us in our environment. And in a lot of indigenous languages, they don't use the term it. They do use the term she or he or like personified inanimate objects because they don't believe that they're inanimate. They do believe that they have a spirit and a wisdom and a knowing. And so it helps create like a deeper sense of connection. And I think it is another level of respect. It's like this is more than just a plant. So I just wanted to add that real quick.
I love that. Thank you. Yeah, I call my animals like I call like like my cat, I call her Miss Kitten, and then I call like my I call them like Miss or Mister. Like I don't know, it's just something I do because they're not just an animal, they're my babies. So I
Yeah,
relate.
yeah. But to go back to the trainings, yeah, so I did do a training in Guatemala and then I did do a training in Bali. And I'm really happy that I did both because they were so different. The one that I did with my mentor and teacher, who I love in Bali, was much more rooted in Hinduism, Buddhism, and New Age spiritualism were like all intertwined in there, as well as some information about like the Mayan lineage and things like this. But she really added in a lot of elements of her study because she's studied in depth about those three things that I just spoke about. And so I could feel that interwoven into her teachings around cacao. And then I learned that, and then I decided to kind of pilgrimage to the motherland of cacao, to Guatemala, and learn its original story. And also the wisdom keepers, the Mayans, who have kept this information for us for thousands of years. I wanted to learn directly from them. And so that way I could have a very like well-rounded understanding of the medicine. And it's funny though, because the more I travel, the more I find that there's so much I don't know because there's so many cultures that actually have very, very long lineages with cacao, like the Dominican Republic, for example. I was just living there. I had no idea how deeply cacao weaves into the Taino culture, which is the indigenous from Cuba, Dominican, Haiti, and Puerto Rico. So I keep on learning, but yes, they were very different, but both equally beautiful and powerful.
I love that. Yes. Yeah, and speaking of language, I noticed you used the word pilgrimage. I would love for you, if we steer, we'll definitely be coming back to cacao, but I would love for you to share a little bit about kind of your journey as a digital nomad, because I feel like that's just such a fascinating lifestyle. I know when we've talked about it, I'm like, wow. Just the fact that I feel like the amount of courage that it takes, and I feel like just detachment from the ego when it comes down to our possessions and those kind of things, how you work through all that to really be super free in that process. I would love for you to chat a little bit about how you have that's been your lifestyle for quite some time.
Yeah. I definitely had to go through the process of getting rid of things in phases
Mhm.
because I had a strong sense that it was going to be quite overwhelming for me to go from having an entire furnished apartment to having everything I owned in 2 suitcases, more or less. So over the course of the year that I was preparing to become a digital nomad, I would kind of do like periodical spring cleanings where I'd go through my apartment again and be like, okay, what am I not using? What can I get rid of? I did that like 3 or 4 times. And then I had like 2 big garage sales. So I definitely made it incremental because you're right. I had a very deep connection to things as being part of my self-worth. And also there was like kind of like a fear connection. Like, what
Mhm.
if I need this? What if
Mhm.
I don't know, like it was like a strange tie. And I did it slowly for sure. And then once I did it though, I felt so free. I felt
Mhm.
so less burdened.
Mhm.
Everything that I owned, I absolutely loved. It was kind of like I went through my own personal journey with who's that super cute lady who goes through people's houses and
Marie Kondo, I think is her
yes,
name. Yes.
exactly.
Yes.
Yes. So it was like that because then I had dwindled everything I owned down to probably like 4 or 5 of those medium-sized plastic Tupperware containers, and then the 2 suitcases that I was traveling with.
Mhm.
Well, a backpack and a suitcase. And that felt really, really good because then I knew everything that I had. I knew everything that I had that I loved. And there were some weird things that I held on to for like a year or two into being a digital nomad that after when I would come back home and visit, I'd be like, I don't know why I have this, and I'd sell it or donate it or something.
Mhm.
But I think moving through it in stages was helpful because I feel like it can kind of be a shock to your nervous system to have lived one way for so long and then just kind of like completely change.
Mhm.
So, but it
Mhm.
felt very good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know like with the like emotional attachment piece to possessions, there can be a lot of genetic trauma that like feeds into that. I know folks that if I'm working with someone maybe like with specifically hoarding, I
Mhm.
always ask like, has there been a history of like um poverty or
Mhm.
even like having ancestors in the Great Depression or just that
Oh,
kind of lifestyle? Because I know my grandparents, like who grew up during that time, they didn't get rid of like anything. Like
mhm.
I mean, of course I got rid of things, but there would be just like these odd little things like screws or just like I can't even name it, but just this
Yeah.
miscellaneous stuff. Being able to see how that's carried over even into like myself and going through that purging. It's because there's so much energy that can be attached to things, I feel like
Yeah.
too, which is interesting.
Yeah, and clothing.
Yeah.
Clothing was one of the like the hardest ones for me to get rid of. I had all these clothes that I didn't like to wear that but I would not let go of them. It was really strange. And it definitely felt like kind of like yucky energetic connection, not even like a positive one, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm in that process right now. I'm like, I have not worn this in 4 years, but why can't I let go of it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, maybe I'll learn something today that'll help me detach.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool though. I appreciate you just being so honest, like with that process and how it was challenging. Because I think
Mhm.
that's something that um, people either like should know going into if they would want to try that. But I think it's also, it just shows your own human vulnerability throughout that process too, because you're right, it's such a way of life that we're conditioned to.
Yeah. And I think that it helped me to not have things for a while because
Mhm.
I was living abroad for the last like 4 or 5 years, but just recently we moved here to Georgia and kind of set up a home base. So now I have more things. But I feel like it was a really good practice for me to be living in like furnished Airbnbs
Mhm.
and stuff that weren't mine because I realized that your couch is like not that important and
Mhm.
your table is not that important and the rug you have in your living room is not that important,
Mhm.
and it helped me relax around a sense of control. I think that I carried a sense of tension and anxiety that I carried in my body around
Mhm.
protecting those things, so
Mhm.
much so that I would be worried if I had people over, are they going to ruin this stuff?
Mhm.
And I realized it doesn't really matter because I will fix it, I will clean it, I'll get a new one, whatever the story is, like I will play out that storyline if it even ever comes.
Mhm.
Um, and it was really relieving to kind of release the sense of like anxiety that was on my shoulders
Yeah.
around the stuff. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, it makes me think of like in sitcoms where like they have like the furniture that's covered in the plastic and you like can't even sit on the couch. That's what it makes me think of. I don't know why,
Yeah.
but yeah, it kind of defeats the purpose of just being rather than like having to have so much doing involved in that process of like I got to think of this, that, and the other. That's so interesting. So while you were a digital nomad, I think you mentioned you were a marketer during that time and then created Cacao Wisdom. What kind of like led to that process?
Yeah, so I started my journey as a digital nomad with a company that I created called G Marketing Co. It's a boutique
Mhm.
marketing agency that I've been running for a while now. And that is what I did for the last actually almost 8 years because I had it as a side business for a while too before I became full-time traveler.
Mhm.
And it was actually during my time living in Bali that I went through, I kind of like to call it the second phase of my healing journey, and I'm sure I'll have many more through my lifetime. But I can look back on my timeline and see points of heavy shifts, like points of heavy transitions. And so I had one point in 2014 that was like a big wave, and then I had another big wave in 2019, 2020. And it was during this 2019, 2020 wave when I went to a women's circle in Bali because I've been into spiritual stuff and personal development and all this stuff for since the 2014 wave.
Mhm.
And so I was at this women's circle and they were serving cacao, and I don't like modern day chocolate. So when I heard that they were serving cacao, I just assumed it was like a hot chocolate and that I wasn't going to like it. And in my mind, it's so funny. I was like, oh, I'm not really going to drink that, but I want to go for like the women's circle part. So they're serving the cacao and she's explaining what it is. And I start drinking it. And I was like, oh, this is way different than modern chocolate. I don't know what this is. I kind of like it. And I
Mhm.
was drinking it during the ceremony. And then I had this big emotional release.
Mhm.
This was one of my first times even sitting in circle with a whole bunch of women that I didn't know. So I was very shocked at how emotional I was getting in this circle, like full on like crying and having this whole experience. This song was like reminding me of my mother and like the lineage of my mothers and grandmothers. And I was just having this, yeah, this like really deep experience. And so
Mhm.
that's what sparked this curiosity inside of me, um, asking myself, what is this? And
Mhm.
what is this doing to my body right now? Like, I didn't understand. And that's when I deep dove into cacao, was after that ceremony. It's when I found my mentor in Bali and I started going to her circles and I went to her retreats and then I did her trainings. And then I started my own journey with Mama Cacao where I would sit with her almost every day for a few years. Um, because just a little bit of background in my personal story, what I was going through at the time was feeling extremely disconnected from my body, feeling very numb, not being able to tap into the emotions that were stuck inside of my body from trauma in this lifetime and from lineages of trauma that I was born into. And when I had that big emotional experience, I was so excited because I was like, oh my God, I can feel something. Like, look at all this stuff that's coming out. I knew it was in there. Like, intuitively, I knew it was in there. Plus, it was causing me physical pain, all these trapped emotions. So I knew there was a lot going on that I needed to move, but I didn't know how to do it. And Mama Cacao was something that really held me. To help like facilitate that journey. She's not like end all be all savior or anything like this, but like while you're on your journey of healing or expansion, she's like a very powerful tool, like a very, yeah, so powerful. And that's why I love her so much, is because she helped me so much.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Gabrielle. I appreciate you again, just like being so like open and sharing your journey in this, because yeah, that's so fascinating how it sounds like she kind of found you and and I think that's something I really relate to, because I know in my first circle with you, I think in every circle I've done with you, I'm always like, but that's just how I am. Um, but yeah, you're so right. And actually, I wanted to mention or ask you. You said a second ago, like what's happening with your body during cacao, like that kind of came to mind during your first experience. Would you explain a little bit about like the physiological components and powers that cacao contains and really activates? I know you've mentioned like she's a heart opener, and really works in your heart space, and I would love for you to go more in detail about that.
Yeah. So there is a property in cacao called theobromine, and that translates to food of the gods. And it is in this property that when you drink her, she literally opens up the capillaries and blood vessels in your body. So, on a scientific level, these are being opened. And so you have much greater blood flow. The energy is circulating through your body better. You can even feel a little bit tingly when you drink Mama Cacao, because it's moving things. It helps move things. She can help decrease the risk of blood pressure, high blood pressure. She's very good at healing a lot of things related to the heart. Very like heart centric energy here. And in the theobromine, this is also the spiritual part of the cacao. This is the part that science doesn't fully understand what exactly happens. But on a spiritual level, they talk about the heart chakra being opened. They talk about deeper connection with your intuition and the intuition that lives in your heart as well. It's very powerful. Like some of the things that you may experience when you drink cacao are, like you said, lucid or very vivid dreams. You can experience a lot more synchronicities. So, you know, those times when you're thinking about your best friend and then she calls you, or when you hear some strange lyric in a song and then you go to talk to somebody and they say those exact words like in that order, and you're just like, what? Those
Yeah.
strange little nuggets from the universe or whatever you believe in. So a lot of that will happen. Also, you can get a lot of insights, sudden knowings. Some people call them downloads. Some people call them aha moments, where things just kind of click. Things maybe you've been thinking about for a long time, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's why, or I see it, or oh, that makes more sense because I see this and this now and how they connect. Um, Also really powerful for anything creative, anything out of the box thinking, strategy, music, art, um, dance, meditation. These are all really powerful because what she does is she helps open up the right side of your brain. She helps add more feminine energy into your body. So in our society, we're very heavy the yang energy. I don't like calling it masculine because it has nothing to do with gender and has nothing to do with any of that. So it's yang energy. It's like the direction oriented, goal oriented. This is what I'm doing. Very linear focus. And then Mama Cacao helps add in fluidity, add in emotion, add in connection to feeling. So she's very balancing for a very yang dominant society, which is why I think she's going to be very impactful here in the United States, and why she's also very impactful in Europe, because in these societies specifically, it's very yang dominant, and we need more yin, more cyclical energy. Yeah.
I love that. That's so magical. And you just explain it so beautifully. So I just really appreciate that. And yeah, you're so right. I know you and I we've talked a little bit about like the divine feminine and working with that. How has the I guess you're like your relationship with Mama Cacao really helped you tap into that flow state, that kind of what you described, like the I think you said like the secular kind of instead of linear. I would love for you to kind of dive into that a little bit.
Yes, so much. Yeah, so I personally don't drink coffee very often because coffee has more of that yang energy. You know how they say like America is fueled on coffee? It's true. It has that very strong yang energy. And I will get anxiety because I think I have too much yang energy in my body. So that just like takes me tilted in the opposite wrong direction for me. So, yeah, so I don't drink coffee. When I feel like I want to have some tool, some plant medicine to help me tap into that more like fluid, flowy energy, I will sit in ritual with Mama Cacao in the mornings or really any time of day, honestly. But I love starting my day with her because what I'll do is I'll set my intention for the day because that's one of the really powerful parts of drinking cacao is you want to tell her your intention because with every sip that you take of her, you're pouring that intention, you're pouring that energy into your body. And what I love about this stuff is that if you look into Bob Proctor's work, Joe Dispenza's work, all these other big players in the self-healing industry right now, they're all talking about like quantum physics, they're all talking about energy. And Mama Cacao, she plays right into that because, you know, when you tap into these like deep truths, they're not all separate. They're all like very intertwined. And so when I set my intention in the morning and I hold the energy in my body of what I want to experience that day, like let's say I want to work on a creative project and I want to be in my feminine and my kind of like flowy, like letting myself move with my feelings and following my intuition around this creative project. I held that energy in my body, and now I'm tapping into like Joe Dispenza type work where I'm purposely creating the frequency, and then Mama Cacao is like helping facilitate that. So it's wild to me the overlap of like ancient wisdom with like modern spirituality.
Yeah.
Um, sorry, I digress a little bit, but
No,
how
I'm here for it. I'm eating it up. Yes.
it's so cool.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Absolutely.
yes, but how she helps with that is yeah, like I said, bringing in the more flowy, fluid aspects, not so focused on the end goal, but helping you tap into the feeling, like feel and then move, feel and then move. It's
Mm.
yeah, it's being guided a bit more by your body, by your feeling, and not so much by your mind. Not to say it's not good to be guided by your mind, but sometimes it can be out of balance, and then this
Right.
is adding back into balance.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's such a that balance. It's the name of the game for sure. And yeah, quantum physics is something that I used to think was like way out of reach and like, oh, I'll never be able to understand that. But actually, like as I've gotten more and more into spirituality, because I've always loved science, it's always been a passion of mine. But as I've gotten more into spirituality, the quantum physics is making all the sense in the world now. And I'm like, wow, I feel so smart as I'm
So
like,
cool.
oh, it's funny, but yeah, especially like just in the psychedelic realm, like there's so many unexplainable kind of what you said a little while ago, where it's like that leaving that space for the unknown. I mean, that is part of it, and that cannot be measured. Because I mean, I
Mhm.
know I've gotten into arguments with people in the scientific realm before because I love to challenge science, and I think that's what we're supposed to do because it's like a
Yes.
man-made. I say man-made, but it's like it's human-made, and like humans are imperfect, and so we cannot assume that we know all the answers. So
Mhm.
yeah, I love flipping that kind of stuff on its head. And then the quantum physics supports that. It's
Yeah.
like the energy, the space, the kind of ether that we can't see, but it's there. Kind
Mhm.
of like radio waves, we can't see those, but they sure as heck are there.
Yeah.
That's so fascinating. I love that. Yeah, and I know even too, even just exploring like nature's symbols and how like they show up in our body. That's something that's so interesting. Like I know like especially being a female, with like our womb and everything, how that shows up in the galaxy with like
Yes.
black holes and like wormholes and how they're portals and like all the physics, and how we literally have that in our body. It's like, tell me it's a coincidence. I don't think so.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love that. Yes, exactly. Yeah, and like how the shape of our throat area right here is so similar to the shape of our ovaries and our womb and everything, and how deeply connected women's voices are to their womb, and when women have been like silenced or not allowed to speak their truth, how they have a lot of tightness and compression then in their womb, and then can have all sorts of issues around sensuality, sexuality, pregnancy, menstrual issues, all this stuff.
Mhm.
What? Yeah, so cool.
Absolutely. Yeah, it blows my mind. And that's why I love like the Ayurveda specifically and being able to bring that perspective in with nutrition because it's, I think just Western culture is so much like digestion is like what happens in your stomach and like in the lower half. And I'm like, we're forgetting the whole upper half. But if you think about like your favorite meal and your mouth starts to water, I mean, that's digestion. Like it starts in
Mhm.
the mind and it's our saliva is an enzyme that's supposed to break down food. So it's so cool like where people will come to me for nutrition stuff and I'm like, okay, well, we need to actually like help you with your stress. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, because that's where the problem really is. It's not so much like in how you're eating, but like it all, yeah, it's all connected. It's all connected. Ugh,
Yes.
that's so interesting. So when it comes down to cacao wisdom and what your mission is, like, do you have like a vision for that right now, or is it still kind of unfolding, or like, what are you hoping to see like in the next year with cacao wisdom and just cacao in general?
Yes. So I do have a vision. I would love to have a movement that sweeps across our nation where people are connecting with cacao, because there's a legend about Ish Cacao, a Mayan legend, that says when humanity is the most disconnected with themselves and with Mother Nature, she will reintroduce herself back to the world. She will walk out of the jungle and reintroduce herself. And if you look at the history of cacao, she did this in the early 1500s when the Spanish came to Central America and then they took cacao back to Europe with them. She swept the world in this like craze and devotion to chocolate, what is now called chocolate. Like there was a love affair with cacao that just completely took over the world. Similar actually to coffee. Coffee has, which is why I feel like they're brother sister energy. They both have very similar stories. They both have very similar trees, grow in similar areas, similar beans. The process is similar. It's just so uncanny how similar
Mhm.
they are, but with like opposite energies. So
Mhm.
to me, I consider them like a brother sister relationship there. But yeah, so the last time cacao swept the world was in the early 1500s, and it seems that she is now in the process of doing that again, because you'll notice that there are a lot of people who are feeling very called to cacao, very called to holding cacao ceremonies, very called to bringing cacao back to their home countries, all over the world, in Europe, in Asia, in North and South America. um, and so I think that this resurgence is part of the process of helping us as humanity reconnect to Earth, because we've become so disconnected from our food sources, from understanding like reciprocity and cycles, and understanding where our food even comes from and the power of the energy that we receive from this earth. I mean, we're starting to understand it with like the earthing movement that's coming through. But I think this is a piece of that. And so I hope to help facilitate that movement, and then also pair that with women being able to use cacao as a tool, as a nurturing mother that she is, to help us do our own deep healing, because I think there's a lot of wounding, there's a lot of sexual trauma, emotional trauma, all sorts of stuff around being a woman, where women feel very disconnected from their wombs, from their cycle, from their power,
Mhm.
from
Mhm.
understanding like how to connect it to their womb wisdom. Like, you're talking about how the womb is a portal. Like, we are the only ones that have this aspect of our bodies where we can literally bring a soul onto the
Mhm.
planet.
Ah!
Like, there is some deep, deep power here that I feel we have lost touch with over the centuries. And so I would like to also help, like, alongside of teaching about cacao, also teach how to work with cacao to reconnect with this power, with this womb
Mhm.
wisdom, with like the divine feminine, like the healthy divine feminine, because we can go
Mhm.
into like the unhealthy masculine and the unhealthy feminine that's been
Mhm.
very prevalent in our society.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's my vision.
Mm. Oh, well, I'm even more happy that you're just sharing your story with us today, just because, I mean, that's something I 100% want to get behind and support you on. And I feel like I cannot agree more just with how needed it is in our world today, because you're so right. Like, it's so sad how much we've disconnected from ourselves and from others, and we can't just blame COVID for that. I mean, it's something that I think has been a long time coming.
Mhm.
um I mean, COVID certainly didn't help, but but yeah, and I'm so excited that this is happening now and that I'm alive and get to be a part of it. It's like,
Yeah.
wow, what a gift. But yeah, you're so right, especially when it comes down to women and kind of almost like reclaiming our narrative and like reclaiming our relationship with our body. Because I know, like, with our cycles, it's been something that has been like, so it's almost become a taboo in some ways, I feel, where it's like, oh my gosh, like, I have to send my boyfriend to the store to get me tampons, and he's like, like, I'm like, dude, go on. And it's, or something that we dread, and it's like, oh, I have my period, whatever, where it's like
Mm.
just being able to flip that around and be like, no, this is something that is, we're releasing and we're recharging and learning to move through it. I know we've talked about that a little bit with, like, especially us both being female entrepreneurs, like
Mhm.
aligning our business with our cycle. I would, if you're comfortable sharing about that, I would love for you to do so, because it's something that has been a game changer for me. So I know others certainly would benefit for hearing more about it.
Oh, absolutely. I love talking about cycles because I agree with you. I think it is something that has become taboo, and I would love that to be one of the first things that shifts, because I think that's
Mhm.
one of the like easiest things to shift first
Yeah.
is our relationship with our cycle, and then our relationship with men and our cycle.
Yeah.
I, like you said, love using my cycle as a rhythm to follow when planning out not only stuff with my business, but actually things with my personal life. So
Mhm.
I track my cycle, and I know that when I'm going into my fall or my winter. So to back up a second, there are 4 phases of your cycle. And when you are starting to bleed, this is called your winter. And then you move into spring. And all these can be paired scientifically with the hormones that are being released in your body at these different phases. But
Mhm.
I like to just connect it with the seasons of Earth. And many people do. This isn't something I invented. Many people do. And so they'll call the next phase spring, and then summer, fall. Fall is kind of when you typically experience like the PMS symptoms, and then the winter is when you start your cycle again. And so I know that after tracking my cycle for a while, when I'm in my fall and in my winter, I am much less likely to want to be social. So when I am planning times to hang out with friends or to hold events in my house, I will look at my calendar and I will see, am I going to be in my fall or winter? Because if I am during that time, oh, sorry,
Oh, it's okay. Yeah.
let me put this on focus real quick.
Sure.
Okay, there we go. I know that during that time, I am most likely not going to want to actually interact with people. And the last thing that I want to do is have made plans with my friends and then wake up that day and be like, oh, I don't really want to hang out with my friends. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to like create that, come at them with that energy. You know what I mean? I want to
Mhm.
present and want to connect when I hang out with my friends. So I use it in that sense. I also use it, I am very creative when I am in my winter, because winter is such a powerful time for introspection. And during that time too, I'll get some really good ideas for my business. So sometimes I'll save any kind of writing that I want to do for winter. And then I'll save more of the like networking or going out and experiencing other events or festivals or things to do in my spring and summer when I have a ton of energy, when I sleep less. Also, I don't know if you know this, but in your spring and summer, your face is more symmetrical. So you feel more beautiful. Yeah, when you're in your spring and summer. So those are really good times to meet other people. If you're an entrepreneur and you need to take photos for social media or take videos, that's a really good time.
Here we go.
You'll be feeling like extra beautiful, and your energy, can be felt through your photos and videos. So that's a powerful thing to do. But as far as linking cacao into with your cycles, I find that I crave cacao much more when I'm in my fall and winter. And you know how there's that stereotype that women crave chocolate when they're on their period. And this is by no coincidence, because there are a lot of properties in cacao that are really beneficial for women when they are on their cycle or about to start their cycle. There's magnesium, there's iron, there's bliss chemicals like tryptophan and forgot the name, serotonin. So it elevates your mood. It adds in some of the nutrients that you're needing when you're bleeding. And so cacao is really powerful to drink during those times. And I have even found, speaking to many other women, of course, everybody's body is different, but that cacao will decrease your symptoms. So I have no bloating, I have no cramping, I have no mood swings when I drink cacao before I start my cycle. So she's definitely really powerful when it comes to pairing with cycles.
Yeah. That's amazing. And I love working with women, especially like helping them kind of explore PMS and specifically like PMDD as well, because that's something that, I mean, a lot of doctors don't really know about or sometimes recognize. And knowing that there's a tool like cacao and there's all this ancient wisdom and modern, just everything coming together, it feels like there's a huge paradigm shift that's occurring. And I mean, just what a gift. I think it's a long time coming. So I love that for us women.
Yeah, me too. And I learned something really cool about PMS that I can share with you.
Yes.
One of my teachers in Mexico told me this, and I've been experimenting with it, and I'm finding it to be true for me. And I'm curious to see how other people feel about this. She was telling me that PMS is specifically around the emotional part, is more intense, because you know how not every time you're about to start your cycle are your PMS symptoms the same. Sometimes like you'll have more bloating, more cramping, less cramping, more mood swings, less mood swings. And she said the reason for this is that it's actually not related to just starting your cycle at all. It's related to your body going through the process of energetically cleansing you and releasing emotions stored in your body from the last 28 days, the last lunar cycle, that you didn't take the time to work through, that are now your body is helping you release. Because the cycle and the bleed is all about the shedding and the releasing what no longer serves you. It's a really good time to release like emotions and stuff like that. And so she was saying, when you feel like extra frustrated or angry, it's not because like that's just something that happens when you're about to start your period. It's because those are the emotions, and frustration and anger are really big ones for us women, because societally we're expected to not be angry or frustrated, because that makes you, a bad person, and like the B word and all this stuff. So, so we repress that. Like it's very common to repress those emotions. So it's kind of by no coincidence then that so many women experience those specific like anger and frustration around when they're shedding and releasing things that the body knows is not good for us, like knows that we shouldn't be storing this. And so they come out during that time of shedding and release.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's something so valuable and such a huge gift to ourselves to not resist that, but to learn to listen to it and tune into it, like you were saying, because it's a lot of times stuff that has been really needing our attention. And it's like maybe it was just kind of lightly tapping. And then when PMS comes around, I kind of share with people how like we have only so much energy. And this is like specifically my approach with PMDD. So it's like super PMS essentially, but it's like, let's say we have 1 to 100 energy points, if you want to say it like that. And let's say when we're not PMSing, 60% of that energy can go towards our life and relationships and this, that, and the other. And maybe we only need 40% of those points to manage our emotions. But let's say like stuff is building up, like we haven't processed things, life, whatever. And then here comes our body like about to go through the shedding, and it's going to require maybe 60% instead of 40%, but it's going to require 60% of our energy. And then we maybe only have 40% left, but let's say life is requiring still that 60%. We're at a shortage of energy. And that's when I see the emotional symptoms come up so much more severe, as if there's been a history of imbalance going on. Like we're not receiving enough, or we're not acknowledging our needs and advocating for that. And that's really what I see a lot of times with resentment too, is like resentment comes from that root of giving too much and not enough to ourselves. So it's such valuable communication that our body is bringing our way if we learn to listen to it instead of being like dreading it or ignoring it or suppressing it. It's not going anywhere.
Right.
It's not going anywhere. So it's like what happens if we lean into it and listen to ourselves and really honor ourselves and our bodies? It is a game changer.
Yeah, I love having my period. It's one of my favorite times because I love to stay at home, kind of cocoon, like go in my cave. Like it's an excuse for me to clear my calendar to do nothing except what I want to do. And most of the time that's like lay in my backyard on a blanket all day, drinking cacao and like having a bonfire in the backyard, maybe watching the stars. Like yeah, it's like this really beautiful permission slip that I give for myself, like knowing that this is time for me to slow down. Like it's everything related to winter, to slow down, to like be cozy, to like nurture, bubble bath, essential oils, like all these things.
Yes, spoil yourself.
Yeah.
I love that. Absolutely. Yeah, and that's something I love too about you, Gabrielle, is how much you've taught me about and how much I relate to your story, even with really kind of again like reprogramming the narrative behind what self-love looks like, and how it's not just this superficial. I think you used like marketing buzzword before when I've heard you talk about it, which is so on point. And how it's like really just not just taking the time to love ourselves when it's easier, when it feels good, but it's like really showing up for ourselves when we need it the most. I mean, that's I think something I'm at least seeing in my own journey. But I'd love for you to share a little bit more about like your definition of self-love and how that's transformed lately too.
Yeah, so my definition of self-love is ever flowing, it's ever changing. I know we've done some cacao ceremonies where we take time to define it, and it's so interesting. The more people you talk to, the more you'll realize that everyone's definition is so different. Lately, mine has definitely been to slow down and allow time for rest, and also self-compassion and self-forgiveness. Because for me, things that are coming up right now are I went through this journey, this shift of my perspective and my awareness. And then when I spend time with like my family or my older friends, I see that there's a disconnect between who I am now and the way that I like to think and operate, and who I used to be and who they connect to. And so I need to show myself a lot of compassion, because I'll get frustrated if I feel like I'm like falling into like old patterns or getting triggered by things that I thought I wasn't going to get triggered by anymore. And so self-love is all about, for me in this moment, um, holding space for myself to be able to make mistakes in that transition process and be able to get triggered and then recognize it and then not judge myself, but just be aware, oh, that happened. That's okay. Okay, now we're moving into this next phase of like how I want to think and feel and the story I want to write about what just happened. And so, yeah, that's my current definition. But like you said, it's so much more than the marketing buzzword of let me go get a manicure and pedicure and go to the spa. Not to say that that isn't very healing and nourishing, because it is, but I think it's done like very unconsciously, where the self-love that I like to teach and talk about is something that has a lot of consciousness around it, a lot of intention, a lot of awareness of when am I being mean to myself? Where am I judging myself? Where am I being really harsh with myself? And is that conditional? Like, am I nicer to myself when I act or look or behave this way? And am I meaner to myself when I act or look or behave this way? And why is that? Where is that coming from? So yeah, it's exploring all of that stuff.
Mm. That's powerful. And I feel like that's so powerful. And I just admire your self-awareness so much. I think that's something that I just, from the first moment I met you, I could tell like, she's different. I like her. So I just think that's so important, because I think it shows how much courage you have. I mean, essentially, because I think self-awareness is, it's no small feat, and it's not always fun or easy to see certain things. But like you said, when you're able to attach that compassion to it, it takes on a whole other, I mean, vibration in a lot of ways. Instead of being like, oh gosh, I did this, like I'm so bad because I made this mistake, or I'm so bad because I said whatever it is. It's like as soon as we add that meaning to it, it doesn't have the chance to move through us, and we don't gain anything from that. I say it's like adding salt to a wound. And it's like, here we go, like our humanness is showing, like why beat ourselves up about something that's inevitable. And that's so powerful. How do you feel like that journey that you've been on has kind of shifted expectations that you may have, whether it's like with yourself or maybe even like interactions with other people? Have you noticed that show up, at least in that way?
Yeah. It really helps when I go into a situation where I know that I might be triggered in some way, where I kind of like mentally prepare myself of like how I want to show up instead of react. So this is something really powerful that I've learned is in the moment, if I could recognize if I'm reacting or responding. And by responding, I mean responding with intention, not responding as a reaction to like a trigger or something that made me mad or something that kind of hit somewhere in here, like emotionally. And when I do that, I have a much better experience overall. So like an example of that is like when I first started my healing journey, I remember being really triggered when I would go into bars, because bars are they're such a strange place, they go in there to be seen. Well, I mean, people go in there for all different reasons. But when I would go into a bar, one of the first things I used to do was look around the room and then decide who was the most attractive person in the bar. And then I would be like judging myself against them the whole night. I would like hyper focus on different people, thinking, oh, they're the cool person, they're the funny person, they're the rich person, they're the person I want to talk to. Just like labeling, and it's all made up, right? Because I obviously have absolutely no idea, like if any of this is true. And then I would have this very uncomfortable experience in the bar where I wouldn't even be present with the people I was talking to. I'd be like half what those key players are doing that I just, decided were the most important people in the bar. And I played this game with myself where before I would go into a social setting like this, a bar or even like a house party or something, I would decide I am going to be fully present. I am the main character of my show. Like you know, and I don't care what those people are doing because I just want to be here. I want to see who I meet. I want to see what kind of cool conversations I have, and I want to be fully present.
Mhm.
And a trick that someone taught me actually is when if you feel like you're like not present, like you know how you can get kind of like zingy, like up here where you're like unfocused, you like your attention is like a bunch of different places, was to cover one of your ears and breathe because you can hear yourself breathe a lot easier if you cover one of your ears. And it just kind of helps you create this presence really quickly, listening to your breath. And in a loud bar, you can't really hear what's going on. But if you cover one of your ears, you can hear yourself breathe. And that was a cool trick that I used as far as like awareness goes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it definitely has had a profound impact on my life. But I remember that specifically when I was first starting, that was a big one.
Yeah, and I mean, gosh, that's like I feel like 100% what middle school is in a lot of ways too. It's like we're so conditioned to be, I mean, really, like we're wired like for social acceptance because if you
Mhm.
think back in the day, if we didn't have a mate, if we were socially rejected, it very much was a life or death situation. So I always like to help people understand like, oh, your caveman brain's kicking in right now. It's not your fault, but at the same time, now that you have that awareness, what are you going to do about it? Because you
Mhm.
can't let that control you. It's going to be there, sure, but what can you learn from it? And people are such mirrors to us, and so
Mhm.
I'm so like proud of you for again having that courage for taking that step back and being like, I don't have to actually, this doesn't have to be my reality. I don't actually have to do this.
Right.
And caring for yourself. And I love that main character analogy. I say something very
Mhm.
similar to people where I'm like, why are you being the best supporting actor when like your
Mhm.
cast is the lead? Like, come on. So
Mhm.
yeah, and maybe this is just me and my love of movies too, but it's also like we so often, and this is not my quote, but I don't know who said it, but it's like we so often compare our behind the scenes with everyone's highlight reel,
Mm.
and I love that because it's so true, and I feel like social media has really attributed to that in a lot of ways too, because people will only post like the highlight reel or what they want you to believe, and that's why I've started to be kind of conscious even with my content, like posting videos of me crying, like going through grief, because I'm like,
Mhm.
sure, it's not always fun to have people watch me like ugly cry where I'm like my face is all spluttery or whatever, but it's like, but that's the true, and that's what I'm going through, and I think that if we shut those parts away and hold shame over them, like that's doing a disservice to ourselves and our ability to create real connection as well.
Mhm. For sure.
Yeah. So that's why I just like really appreciate you again being so open and vulnerable. That's something that I feel like has allowed our friendship to just organically blossom so easily,
Mhm.
because it's like I feel like we'll just kind of go down these rabbit holes, and it's so fun because it's like we're not trying to do anything per se, but it's like we're just exploring. And I feel like that's when the inner child can really, or inner children, there we go, that's grammar. Inner children can really come together and play. And I love those kind of interactions the most.
Mhm. Mhm. Me too. And I love when people are vulnerable and authentic because that's when you can relate. Because I'm sure there's going to be somebody who listens to this who is like, I do that in bars too, and it's like so random. But
Oh yeah,
yeah.
totally. I'm like I feel a little called out. I'm like, okay, that's good. That was so good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just too funny. Or like another one for me is dancing. Like I've gotten into it, ecstatic dance a lot more over the last couple of years. My friend Krista introduced it to me, and the first time I went, I was so uncomfortable. And I realized that every time I would go out dancing, 95% of the time I was dancing for the people I thought who were watching me, not for me. And so the way I would move my body and stuff, like I'd always be thinking like, does this look good? Like, am I in tune with the sound or whatever? And then ecstatic dance is all about having like a spiritual experience with the music where you don't care what you look like. You're literally just moving however it feels natural and like how you feel called to move to the sound. and it has no one's paying attention to anyone. They're so focused internally. And so I noticed that like shift in my head of stopping dancing for other people and starting dancing for myself.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I feel like that was also a big one. But it's just too funny. Like we all do a lot of very similar things, but then nobody talks about it.
Yeah, because we think it's so unique to us, and it's like it's really not.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes me think of the dance aspect. Have you ever been to a silent disco? Have you heard of
Oh
those?
yeah.
I remember going to one in college, and it was one of my favorite experiences in college because it was, I feel like it really promoted in like a time when everyone's kind of, I think, still shedding that high school, like everyone's judging me, I'm watching me, whatever.
Yeah.
I feel like it really challenged that paradigm as well. And it's just like, I don't know, it's such a creative concept too. I love me a silent disco.
Yeah. And dancing is so healing,
Yes,
especially like for women to move your hips because
yes.
so much emotion is stored in our hips and in our necks. And so when we dance, like that's a lot of the parts that we move, is
Yeah.
our hips, our backs, our necks, and it's moving and shifting that energy that could be stuck in there. So I find it to be very healing too.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it was Victoria when we were at her circle, her book tour circle, when she did the breathing exercises with the hip movement. That was like, wow, did not know I needed this, but I did.
Yeah, really powerful.
So good. Wow. And I'm just making sure I'm asking my questions that I wanted to ask you too. Yeah, I think I asked everything that I wanted to ask just because it just kind of organically came up. But I wanted to check in with you and just see like how this experience has been for you, and if there's anything that you feel like just called to share as well. Like don't let me boss everything around. Like I would love for you to really just come through, because that's one of the many reasons why I wanted to invite you today. It's just because I find you to be such an innovative person and someone who really leads with that vulnerability, and this allows for that genuine connection and relatability to be there. And that's something that I think the world is starving for that right now. I mean, our country especially. So it's just, your mission is something that, and just who you are as a person is something that just needs to be shared, just 100%. So I just would love to tune in with you, whether it's like a personal philosophy or just anything else that's like on your heart that you feel you'd like to share. I would love to hear it.
Okay, thank you. Actually, there is one thing that I would like to share, and we can kind of like talk about because I think it's really interesting too, is something that's been coming up for me lately, and then something I've been seeing a lot of is I find that when people are on this journey, and it sounds like probably a lot of people who listen to your podcast are definitely on this journey, is so you're going through this process of learning all this new stuff. And like you said, flipping a lot of old thoughts on their head completely and changing all of these belief systems that we thought were like utter truth, and realizing that they're not, and there's other perspectives and there's other ways of seeing the world and thinking about things. And so we're going through all these shifts and we're changing all these paradigms that are living within our body. And while we're going through this process, we're going through a lot of emotional stuff, because it can be very emotional to realize that, like, oh my gosh, this isn't true, or I didn't have to live my life suffering so much in this way and that way and whatever. And so we do a lot of this work. People call it like doing the work. So we're in this place that is a more elevated state of awareness than we were in before. And then we interact with people who have not gone through this process yet. And
I'm so glad you're bringing this up. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
because so one thing that I notice is that it's easy to get like almost a sense of like spiritual like elitism, or like awareness elitism, because I find that like myself, like I was getting frustrated with people who, especially like family members or friends, who were like thinking in this old way, in this old pattern that I didn't want to be thinking anymore, or talking anymore, or holding this energy anymore. everything around like my relationship to men. Like the old paradigm is like men are bad, men are going to hurt you, like men aren't safe. Or this old paradigm around money is that that's expensive, or I can't have it, or you know, this kind of like lack energy. Or old paradigms around like health, like, oh well, that's just genetic, there's nothing you can do about it. Like this stuff was all stuff that I had switched, like I had changed my paradigms. And so it was very difficult to be around people who were still occupying those old ways of thinking, because I still had resonance with them. It wasn't something random that I had never thought before. It was something that I used to think and now don't think. And so there was almost like a level of fear of slipping back into that old like thought pattern that I had worked so hard to get away from. And
Mhm.
so I would be like angry or frustrated with the people around me, kind of like almost giving away my power, in the sense like they have the ability to control my internal reality. Um, and so I find that I have other friends who are like a more like just starting this journey too. And I find that they even go in through a phase of isolation, where it's almost easier to like distance yourself from society, from old friends, from whatever, than to be around them, because you kind of feel unstable in these like new belief systems that you've developed, and you don't want to go like back, quote unquote, backwards. But you don't really feel confident to like stay rooted and grounded in these new ideals that you've created. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Mm, I'm just so grateful you're in my life, Gabrielle, because like I just love like what you share on, and it's so, it does not, there's not a doubt in my mind that like our connection is something that I feel is like just so like divine timing in so many ways, because I feel like you bring up stuff that's like such a good challenge for me, and or something that's just so parallel. And yeah, like what you're describing is something that like I'm actively working on myself with, like how to like have acceptance with people. And I think I'm getting to a better place with that, where I think I was like I was watching something in like Eckhart Tolle where it was like specifically with family, and because family is something that like I cherish, but also the thing that like can hurt me the most at the same time. It's like my love is so intense to where if it's not like, if I'm not receiving what I'm getting, it hurts a lot, or there's so much grief. And like if I see someone in my family who's like still living in some paradigms that are harmful, that just like, oh, it really takes a toll on me. So learning how to have that healthy detachment and accepting their timeline and their journey, knowing that it's going to happen when it's perfect for them, and may not be what I would want for them.
Right.
But I don't have that kind of power. I shouldn't have that kind of power. I have to
Yeah.
just focus on my own stuff, and that's where my energy is really needed right now. And yeah, Eckhart Tolle was talking about like accepting our family and the limits that they choose to be in, where it's like
Mhm.
sometimes it doesn't always feel like a choice. But there's so, I just think about my own journey and how so much complicated stuff has had to happen in order for me to get here. And that comparison doesn't do anyone any good, where I think that's
Mhm.
something that people tend to, from a loving perspective, but it's still a controlling perspective, where it's like,
Mhm.
well, this is what works for me, so therefore you need to do this. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, like we're two different people, and I can give advice all day long. I can tell you what I think you should do all day long, but it's like doesn't actually help anyone, because sometimes it can actually bring about more shame than anything, rather
Mhm.
than just being there with that person and being on that journey with them. And so, I mean, that's something that is so easy for me to do with my clients. So I'm trying to learn how to incorporate
Mhm.
that into these relationships that I do have more emotional
Yeah.
investment in. And also having to show compassion for myself too, because let's say their journey is maybe taking them away from me because of something, who knows what it is. And allowing myself to grieve that, because
Mhm.
that's I've been in a grief process for, gosh, I feel like the past like 6 or 7 months now with multiple things, but learning how to hold myself in that grief has been like a
Mm.
gift that I'm learning to give to myself as this process is happening. And it allows me to have that healthy detachment and maintain compassion for someone else.
Mm.
But also knowing that like if they're not healthy for me right now, that I am still able and deserving of setting boundaries where I
Mm.
need to as well. And that's something that I think when we talk about boundaries, I don't think we talk about sometimes like enough the grief that comes with setting them, because there's some boundaries that
Mm.
I need to have right now that I don't want to. But there's been enough that has shown me in listening to my body and how much certain things are impacting me that I'm like, okay, I really need to have this boundary. And it's like, ugh, but it hurts.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's complicated.
I love that so much. I'm gonna write that down. I need to journal
I
about
don't even know what I said.
that. I need to journal about that for sure. No, it was like holding the grief around having to set like the boundaries, or
Yeah.
just holding the grief around um, not being able to save everybody.
Mhm.
And I feel like that's something that I've really had to focus on too when I go home and visit family, not being like in, like you said, kind of like teacher mode, like you with your clients, or like me when I'm holding circle or rituals and things like this, is not always feeling like, okay, I have 3 days with them and I have to tell them everything I've learned and
Right. Yeah.
everything I can help them. And it's like so exhausting and so draining. And then they're exhausted because they're like, I just like really wanted to hang out with you, but if you feel like you have to like talk my face off for the next 3 days,
Mhm.
that's your choice. No, but yeah, my little sisters will get frustrated with me. They're like, I can tell that they're like over it. You know, they're like, that's enough. Like you gave me some good nuggets, but that's all I want right now, or that's all I want to process right now. Like, let's just have fun. And I could like almost like I'm watching myself from above. I could like see myself struggling to like just let it go,
Yeah.
enjoy spending time with my family instead of feeling like this sense of urgency or even panic to like fix something. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's powerful. So true. And that's something I'm really learning like with acceptance. Is something that I think like to get to acceptance, like tolerance has to take place. And I
Mm,
don't necessarily mean just tolerating the other person and what they're doing, but for me, at least for me, it's like I'm having to tolerate the discomfort that I'm feeling in setting that
mm,
boundary,
interesting. Yeah.
and in the surrender of like not having control over their timeline and their choices and whatever it is it may be. So it's like for me, it's like having to tolerate that discomfort and hold myself in that grief and discomfort is what allows me to then get to the acceptance, because I feel like I almost had this perception that like acceptance was like not caring, and I just can't do
Mhm.
that, where like I do care so much. But also it's like knowing that I'm just one person. And there's this expression in like my codependent recovery group where it's like if what is it? It's like if you're in someone else's business, or if you're in like God's business or the universe's business, i.e., something that you can't control. It's like
Mm.
who's taking care of your business? And I'm like, wow, like not me. So
Yeah.
that's been huge for me to acknowledge and be like, okay, I actually have a business. I have my fiance, I have like friends, I have my clients, I have my babies and everything. So it's like I have all these things that really deserve my attention right now. So kind of, but learning that I only have so much energy that, and I need a piece of that pie too. So it's like,
Right.
it doesn't mean not caring if I have that detachment, but it just means like trusting in that higher power, like trusting in the universe, and like I'm not going to understand everything right now, and accepting that piece. And then therefore like tolerating like the discomfort that I might feel, and getting curious about like what is that bringing up for me? Like why is this so challenging? Like why is this so painful? Um,
Right.
and that kind of introspection is something that I can give back to myself as I'm going through my own parallel process. So
Yeah. Interesting
it's
stuff, huh?
It's life, right? Man. But yeah, it's definitely like, of course, easier said than done. It's something that I have to practice every day, and I like mean practice as far as like I don't have it perfect, and I'm not expecting to ever have it perfect. And I think it was in our cacao circle, maybe I think it might have been where we were talking about like how perfectionism is like a form of self-abuse. Were we talking about that? Okay, that's what I thought.
Mhm.
Yeah, and like that's something I see too, where it's like if we also hold other people to our standards
Mhm.
constantly, or our expectations or whatever, where sometimes that can be a giving thing if we like can really see their potential, but at the same time if like we are expecting them to be perfect, what our interpretation of that is, it can be really dehumanizing for them as well.
Mhm.
And that's all we are. We're people
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
figuring this thing out. Oh,
Yeah.
man. What are your thoughts on all that? What does that bring up for you?
Um, I I feel like it's something that I see a lot,
Sure.
and I'm not sure that everyone's necessarily like aware that it's happening. And so I was curious what your thoughts were because I think that if you're not aware of it, you can go through a phase of feeling very lonely and
Mhm.
a little bit self-righteous and experience a lot of yeah, like loneliness and sadness that like may otherwise not really be necessary if or wouldn't have necessarily happened if like I had realized that that is what was going on, that it was me kind of like avoiding being around certain types of people because it was hard. But I do feel like there's healthy discernment, while you are building up these new practices, these new paradigms. You don't have to make it harder on yourself by surrounding yourself with a bunch of people who like directly oppose and trigger you all the time, because
Right.
that takes a lot of energy to like constantly hold your center, hold your grounded state of whatever it is that you're trying to become, you're in the process of becoming.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's like finding that balance, because right now I have a friend who's going through that and I see her isolating herself a lot, and I
Mhm.
haven't had this conversation with her yet, but I just find it interesting. Like I wonder if she's aware that she's doing that, or if she's going to be like, oh, you're right, like maybe now while I'm trying to reprogram these paradigms, maybe now I actually really need community support, and it would be
Mhm.
very helpful to me to not feel alone, which is where like women's circles and cacao ceremonies and all that spiritual stuff can come into play, of finding that community, because maybe you don't want to hang out with your um, husband's buddies and their wives because they all have that old paradigm and it doesn't resonate with you, but you don't really have like other friends yet. So you can find these communities who have like more like-minded like energy or thoughts or whatever. Uh,
Mhm.
yeah, so I've just been noticing it.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah, and yeah, I wanted to comment too on like what you said with like the elitism. It's so funny you said that because my friend just sent me this video the other day where it was like it was like a video of these two people, and it was like they're trying to out hippie each other. So it was like, oh, I wake up in the morning and do this stimulate my pineal gland, and it was like, well, I do this and had maca in my smoothie, and it was like, oh yeah, well, it was just like one up, and like I see that sometimes in our
Yeah.
community, like, and I don't think it's something we consciously do, but at least that's not my impression, but it was making me laugh because I'm just like, I've either like been there or I've seen it, and it's just I think it's such a natural part of that process
Yeah.
in some ways, but then it's like when I think it's kind of inevitable, like we will see ourselves again. It's like maybe we had to see ourselves to move up, and then we see ourselves a different way, and we're gonna see ourselves again because I think it's a cyclical thing. But yeah, and like with the isolation piece, I totally have a tendency to isolate. I think just as is being more introverted, being an empath, I just get overwhelmed so easily too. So if I am just naturally that nature of a person and then add like emotionally raw on top of it, I'm like, people are just too much. Like I just
Yeah.
it gets to be too much. But yeah, that's why I'm so glad I found like the cacao ceremonies that you do and just the women's circles in general, because I feel like I've been able to find my tribe um,
Mhm.
of like places that I always feel safe. And that's something
Mhm.
like, if I do need to just go and cry, like y'all are gonna hug me. It's not like, oh my god, just crying. It's like y'all get it. And
Yeah.
it's I find myself more when I'm finding those kind of people, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and like normalizing feeling emotions is a big part of that too. Like I feel like I'm doing my job as a space holder if people are crying in the circle because that means that they feel safe enough to connect with vulnerable parts of themselves that they otherwise haven't connected to lately or yet, or something like new is emerging that like wants to be released and they feel safe enough to like let that happen.
Yeah.
And I always like try to lean into that for myself too, because I'll find that I want to cry in some circumstance and I try to push it down. And then I remind myself, no, 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 let it out. Just let it
Mhm.
flow and let it like pass and move through you and then move on. Like don't hold on to it. Don't suppress it. And
Mhm.
the women's circles are a really good place for that, for like normalizing sadness specifically. I haven't seen too much anger be expressed in them. That's still kind of a scary emotion, I think, when it comes to women and allowing themselves to experience that emotion. For me, I experience it usually at home, like screaming into pillows, beating pillows, like letting the energy out of my body. But I haven't seen that too much in circles yet that I've been holding here. But I would love to get to, well, I want to hold somatic therapy circles at some point, which is releasing the energy out of your body. And in those circles, for sure, there'll be like anger release and things like this.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's powerful
Absolutely.
stuff.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. Like I know back when I did the primal breathwork group with Alexa, that was life changing because we were all just screaming and
Yeah,
sobbing and crying and laughing. Like
yeah,
it was incredible. But yeah, like it's wild, like how that kind of stuff, emotion, energy, like probably something else that we don't know, like it stays in our body. Like our body really is a vessel. Um,
yeah,
and yeah, it's such a gift to give ourselves like non-judgment and just allowing that to release.
yeah, yeah. Because like the book "You Can Heal Your Life" by Louise Hay.
Mm-hmm.
Have you read that one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. She goes through the process of explaining how every ailment and every disease that is in the body is a form of a suppressed emotion stuck in the tissues of your body, and how you can work through releasing that. And I love in the back of her book, she has a chart, and it's crazy how much it resonates every time I look in there of what it is. So, sinus stuff, like when you have a constant runny nose, can be unprocessed emotions, and so your body is helping to release some of the buildup of the emotions, like through that, like kind of the same way you cry, you release emotions. Um, Stuff with like your knee can be like a stubbornness to see a different perspective. Stuff with like your feet could be like a fear of moving forward or change. Like it's so cool.
Mm. Yeah, I love that kind of stuff for sure. Because, yeah, there's this, I don't remember his name, but there's this Chinese psychiatrist that says, like, what the body doesn't express in tears, it makes other organs weep. And
Yeah.
so real,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah. And like and I think, and I share this with people sometimes too, like the language aspect, where like we have all these idioms that hint to that, where it's like a lump in our throat, the weight of the
Mm,
world on our shoulders, a broken heart, butterflies in our
mhm.
tummy, trust your gut. Like it's possessed in our language, but there is so
Yeah.
much like science and just biology behind how our bodies, like it's all connected. Even thinking about, like, I have to remind this might sound weird, but like I remind myself that my skin is an organ, because
Yeah.
sometimes I think like organs are like just internal, like my like intestines and my heart and my liver, but like the skin is an organ too, which is like kind of weird to think about, but at least for
Yeah.
me. But and so that's like really helped me transform my skincare even just mentality, let alone like routine. It's like I gotta really like take care of my body. So it's interesting how it talks to us back.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's true. I forget that our skin is an organ too.
Right? It's just like it's like you don't think about it being an organ, but it's
Mhm.
like it's so interesting.
Yeah,
So I don't know. It's like, interesting. I just feel like the body is so mysterious and magical.
it is. It is. I love talking about this kind of stuff too because it brings in back in the magic. Because I feel like when you're too absorbed in the scientific community, they have this false sense of all knowingness, that they understand how everything works, and then they use these Latin terms that I feel like strip the magic out of what is really happening. And just because they can define what's happening or they understand the process that's happening, they don't always understand, or like 95% of the time, they don't know the why. They're like, yeah, we understand that you cry tears when you're sad, and this is what happens in the tear duct, and this is what chemicals or molecules are in your tear, but why does water leave your eyes? Like they don't know why. Just the same way they don't know why so many things happen in the brain, and with autoimmune diseases and all this stuff. And it's like such a cool reminder to realize how magical the body really is. That's like my favorite example of this is hormones, because
Yes.
when someone explained to me the reason why like women sync up when they're in close proximity to each other is because my womb is literally communicating with your womb without words. So we're trading energy and hormones back and forth, like between our bodies, unseen, and they sync together, and then we'll our cycles will sync. So literally our wombs are talking to each other, and we just call this, oh well, that's hormones, like that's, they do what they do, it's really not that magical, but it's so magical. Like just because you labeled it as this and you categorize them in this like structure doesn't mean it's any less miraculous, and that is what my body is doing right now, what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, even like how like with breastfeeding, like how I just think it's so cool. Like I can't wait to have babies one day because I feel like that's gonna be, I already know that's gonna be a whole spiritual awakening
Oh,
process for me that I'm like, yes, that's gonna be so cool. But yeah, like how like when babies are breastfeeding, like their brain is kind of like one brain with their mothers, like it synchronizes with their mom, and it's like such a huge, like just all the different hormones that are flowing between the two of them, like how they kind of become this one person again, even though like the child has left the womb, like the way that the brain starts to grow and it's stimulated just by breastfeeding. It's more than just getting nutrients and a meal, like it's lunch. It's like, no, its brain is literally growing in sync with this mother. And like even
oh,
hugging, like how we press our hearts together when we hug, like a long hug, we will sync our heartbeats. And like that kind of stuff, it doesn't lie, like it's just
yeah,
so cool.
it is cool. So much
Yes.
magic.
Yes. And did you know that like when you're walking side by side with someone, it like whether you walk in step with them also can show your emotional synchronicity with them. So if you are walking like, yeah, like at the same pace or like at the same stride, it actually shows like that connection's happening too, which
Oh no, I didn't know that.
I love that kind of stuff. It's
Mhm.
so cool. But yeah, our bodies are super magical, and this
Yes.
time with you has been so magical, Gabrielle. It surpassed any expectation. I mean, I already knew it was going to be amazing, but I love just where we were able to go with it, and appreciate again like your own openness and vulnerability and just curiosity. That's something that I just appreciate about you, is I feel like you're such a curious person, and I just think that's so much fun, and I really resonate with that. And I hope this is one of the first many episodes we do together, and just really appreciate again like you taking your time today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I absolutely loved our conversation. It was so fun.
Yes, thank you. And for those of you who would like to learn more about Gabrielle and even get more or try some of her magical cacao, I'm having the link. I'm going to have it in the comment section as well, or in the info section for those who are not streaming in via our video platforms. But here we have cacao.wisdom.com. You can also find her on Instagram, cacao cacao.wisdom. But the magical Gabrielle, everyone, thank you so, so much. And yes, I hope to see you again soon. And for all of those who tuned in today, thank you for your time. And please let us know any feedback that you have, and have this conversation as maybe challenge some paradigms of your own, or resonate with you. So thank you to everyone, and lots of love. Bye for now.
Bye.